Hey everyone, welcome back to the Emotional Revolution podcast. I am so excited and honored today to have Joanna Horton McPherson with me today. It is going to be an amazing episode. She is a six-time founder who trains people to become inspiring speakers, delivering their transformative message. Today's episode is going to be packed so full of so many nuggets that I know are just going to transform your life. So I'm excited to dive in. So thank you, Joanna, for being here today.
My pleasure. I'm so glad to be with you, Kayla.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay, so I love to just start this off. I'm getting to know you today as well, along with everyone else. It's my favorite way to get to know my guests. So I'd love for you just to share a little bit more about what you do.
Sure. I work with people one on one to go back and analyze the professional growth you've come through in your career that's also been your personal journey, and taking time to understand what are the lessons you actually learned, not the things you wanted to do, but what you actually learned, usually through defining moments that are hard. And we concentrate that and get insight about what those lessons mean to us according to our greater purpose. And that's what you build a talk from, because an audience really isn't here for your, you know, tips and hacks and tricks or your resume or your accomplishments. A talk, when we sit in the audience and we see someone inspiring, they're bringing us on their journey because we're on a journey. And so to get to that place where you're not fronting, you're just really sharing, takes a lot of self-knowledge and work. And that's what I do.
Yeah, so how did you get to that place? Because I would say, just from being in business for so long and being around so many different people and all the gurus, right? That's not always the message we hear. It's the message I like to deliver as well, but it's more about focus on the strategy, and then, whatever happens with you happens. But so how did you get to this point by knowing that that inner work was what was needed for that external transformation?
We talked about diving in before we recorded, so here we go. I had to learn personally to get to the next level in my growth as a professional. I had to do a great amount of inner work to get to the place of being confident and valuing my process and my voice enough to be a contribution beyond what I knew how to do. So I trained myself starting back in my 20s, probably. My background is as a professional actor, and I was on stage since about age 13 doing public speaking. But I didn't feel comfortable even having anyone look at me or talk to me. I was very shy as a young person, and the actor's job is to take up space and tell a story and send to the back of the theater, which is 20 rows back. And how do you take up that much space and be willing to be seen? I had no idea. It was terrifying. So I just trained for decades. And I opened my own studio. It's one of several businesses I've done, including nonprofit work with youth telling their stories. That time was not about learning acting. It was about being confident to be open enough to be seen and to receive others, which is deep work. That's personal work.
Yeah. And when you were able to kind of make that switch from being like not even wanting to be seen, which is like the whole point, right, of acting, to be seen, like you said, what was it that you had to do? Like, what was that work that you had to do to allow yourself to open up in that way?
Oof, that's a great question. I've been a meditation zealot for about 15 years, and the practice of being present on the cushion is the same as the practice of being present on stage. I've come to realize. So the training is, I would say, three things. I mean, you learn this in improvisational acting training, just saying yes. So whatever comes down the pike, this is true in life and it's true on stage. Stage is just a metaphor. What's happening? It may not be what you chose or what you asked for, or you even don't like it. You say yes. You incorporate it into the moment. So that when you're on stage and you're in a scene, someone may be having a strong emotion that they're expressing, and your character is meant to live it with them. So you just are receiving. That's one practice, is receiving. The second is to be present. It's not what's happened before, and it's not what's about to happen. So if you learn what to not do, what you begin to center on is what's in front of you, and to take your attention off of what we're used to being, which is worries or fears, and obsessing, like, oh, I'm afraid to be on stage. When you focus on what you see, what you feel, being present, listening, it all opens up.
So, what was your fear? Like, so why didn't you want to be seen and open? What were you scared
Yeah.
of?
Just insecurity. And I think, some of us have our through lines in life, like the journey we keep living over and over. For me, it's, am I enough? Is my is my best effort and me who I am naturally when I'm not able to cover for anything, like an actor's job isn't to pretend. So people are like, oh, you're an actor, so you're pretending right now. The training is to be more, um, to deal with reality and to not make up what's happening, but to be totally connected to what's happening. So there's a level of truth and honesty and emotional honesty that's uh, that's the training. That was the third thing,
Mhm.
emotional honesty.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, my struggle was, um, like, am I going to be good as an actor? But it goes so much further than that, Kayla, because when I had a studio, I didn't break through professionally. I acted professionally for a lot of years, but it wasn't like I made it. You don't know me from my Hollywood career. I opened a studio to train lots of people. And I understood the training so much better when I was teaching it, because naturally I love to teach, but you also teach what you most need to know. And I had so many people they had success beyond what I had, featured in Forbes, a million followers on Instagram, cover of Vogue magazine. I've had clients they've gone in different directions with businesses and so many things, but the best success that I heard them share with me was how their life changed. Like, I don't go to therapy anymore, or I didn't take my depression medication, Joanna, because these classes. I mean, we're talking 6 hours a week in classes, professional level acting. It's so demanding, but to center on a skill of getting outside of what you know how to do, and to be in a supportive community of other people doing it, and to be honest for once, like where that's normal. You don't have to pretend anymore. It shifts so much. And so my journey, and I know you want to understand how I showed up in that, was how rewarding it is to be honest, because it's the opposite of what we usually do, which is seek permission from other people, or want to be valid, or need you know need to be um, valued. But to know your value and to just offer it from a pure place is that's the magic that transforms a person, to know how to get into that space.
Yeah. And that we think about that. I like to call it radical honesty. That's what I like to call it, radical
Mm.
honesty. And the thing with honesty with oneself is that it becomes really hard to discern when we're being honest and when we're not, because the stories we tell ourselves so much are based out of lies, conditioning, experiences, and just repeated thoughts over and over. And so that's where I get a lot of pushback from people of a misunderstanding of how do I know and I'm actually being honest with myself. So what was that like for you? How did you know what honesty
Mm.
was for yourself?
Wow, that's such a good question. I've never thought about this way before. That's a great insight. I would say it takes some time to sit with the thing, because what we all know is we all think we have really good ideas, but that's part of the seduction, is to say things that affirm our version of reality. But what honesty does is it kind of bypasses, like, getting credit for things, or having control really over any of this situation. We don't have any. So I think being honest is a layer that transcends experience, in the sense that it doesn't really matter what it is we're being honest about. It's just a quality. It's a feeling of being in touch with the essence of what's happening. This gets into a little esoteric, but I've had to really understand this through my meditation practice, because it wasn't enough to work on stage because I had a lot of anxiety about, was I good? Like, you can't see yourself. I can't be in the audience and be on stage. Like, I don't know if it conveys. I just had to keep working at it and working at it. And the more I let go of what I thought it was, the more the magic showed up on stage. And I think that's true for life. But what I've learned on the meditation cushion is when we sit with not what we want to be true, but what is true, we get to have more choice about what happens next. And it also softens us. So, to your point, I think our stories can make things concrete and like, yeah, I'm right. Like, this is how it is. But honesty is much softer. And there's another possibility over here. And we know honesty because it opens, and stories contract us. That's my version. I'd love to hear your take on that.
I think that's beautiful. And I think that, just to kind of contribute and expand on that too, is I think that oftentimes when we're trying to figure out if we're being honest or not, I think that that initial honest expression, and it's a lot of times there is that softness, but it immediately gets surrounded by a fear because it's vulnerable. And I think honesty is really vulnerable. And I think when we open up and we expand in that way, we really open us up in a different way. And then the other thing that I think that, and I want to ask you about this too, is when there's a lot of self, right? When there's a lot of me, how will others be viewing me? How is this like for me? How can I serve me? How can I do all of these different aspects? Then I think that it gets a little convoluted with our experience in life because we're coming at it from a very one pointed type of view. And I love what you said of, I can't be on the stage and in the audience at the same time. And I like to think of like, how can we create that though? Like, how can we create that separation from this point of view and be from the audience? And now we're the third party, right? Now we're the third party watching ourselves and the audience. And that's how we're experiencing it. So we're slightly more detached. And that makes moving through life a lot easier because we're not responding to our triggers or our insecurities. We are just doing this honest flow. And sometimes we'll just be really honest. Sometimes it sucks, right? Sometimes what we're doing is not good. Like our presentation of what we're wanting to do, it's just not that good. But that's okay. There's just skill to be learned. There's just competence to gain. There's just things to do. And that's okay because it doesn't have to be a direct hit to our self and our worthiness. And I think that that's a big thing too, because you were waiting for that worthiness to happen, right, from the audience. So, kind of going back to a question here for you is, how did you do that? Like, because there has to, and this is my opinion, you tell me if I'm wrong, there has to be a separation from self to be able to be more objective at your life, to not take everything so personal.
Oh, yeah.
So, do you find that to be true?
Oh, yeah, every day. I mean, we're all ongoing projects. I know I have my stuff I'm working on, myself. I'm really interested in that idea of, don't we all want to be able to have that third party omniscience, I think, well, twofold. One, meditation is such a buzzy thing, but it really is meant to convey a simple gift that is, the moment of presence happens before story. It's the precursor to thought. And what I mean by that is being present. When we talked about not being over here in the past or over here in the future, we know I'm taking my attention off of this, and you go into your body, into the present moment, your experiences and your senses, it's absent of thought. And there isn't an attachment to an idea. So there's where one really beautiful thing about being present, I think. And the other is just back to that witnessing. So you can witness when you're present. So that's one way I'm like, that's a possibility. But I think the beauty of relationship is having another perspective, a mirror. Because something I know in my personal life, being married, having a mirror shows you so strongly yourself in ways that aren't always welcome, but it's important. It's important to see ourselves clearly because we don't see ourselves clearly. And that's the whole point. Once we think we see ourselves clearly, we're in trouble. Then we're willing to overlook stuff because, like, no, I see everything. But now we're just in some agenda. That's not real authenticity. You said waiting for worthiness.
Mm-hmm.
It is such a great way you said that, because none of it's outside of us. We look for the truth outside of us, and it's never, ever, ever there. It's always, the truth is within us. That really means whatever we want to be happening, we must just turn our gaze inward and ask questions here instead of out here, which is where we normally are looking all the time. So, yeah, we could talk a lot about worthiness. I think that's a big part of my journey, honestly, and that's a gift I bring to my clients, and why I'm here today is because it's not guaranteed that any of us arrive in really valuing ourselves, but it is so it's lifetime work to reclaim pieces that we gave away, ways we've operated in relationships that we didn't really consent to, that we're not okay with, to know how to set boundaries and to know how to quit living a life we don't want to live, and to own what we want to be about and what we are about is will change things. It changes things.
Yeah. So tell me more about that. So you said that worthiness was a big part of your journey. So tell me what that journey was like for you.
Yeah, this is really personal, and I do share it quite a bit because I think addiction, and whether people have addictions or just know what it's like to moderate mood with a substance or internet or shopping, whatever it is, we all can relate to when we try to make ourselves more comfortable because the present moment isn't. I am sober because I have had a lifetime of not understanding that I had a problem with alcohol. And then, turns out I'm someone who can't drink because I have to modify my mood with it. I had so much anger and so much pain that I wanted to not feel. And so once you stop drinking, then the thing that made you drink becomes more vivid. We take away the moderation mechanism. Now you're just honest and you're having to sit with it. And so I guess, how do I relate sobriety and worthiness? It takes a lot of confidence to stand in your pain and know that it serves something beyond what you have now. And so that's been a journey for me.
Yeah. So why did you do that? Right. Because a lot of people just jump from one addiction to another, right? Whatever that is, right? So it's just like, okay, well, I don't want to drink anymore because I'm aware that it's harming me in whatever way. But then it's really uncomfortable because now it's like, well, it's all here in front of my face. Well,
Yep.
now I'm just going to be more active on social media, or even now I'm just going to pour myself into my business. So now we think we're being really productive, but we're still trying to outrun what we're trying to outrun. So
Oh, yeah.
why did you choose to go inward instead of just Band-Aid over and over?
I mean, I've done that too. Plenty.
Mhm.
I quit smoking when I was in my 20s, and then I didn't, I was out of addiction for a while. We go in phases, but becoming a parent to children, having a daughter, suddenly, speaking of witnessing, I saw myself from, I wrote an anthology of poetry called The Vulnerability of Birds, because I kept seeing feathers at this time when I started realizing, like, she's watching me drink. I'm teaching her, actually. Is this what I want to be teaching this person? If I inherited intergenerational, moderating my pain through alcohol, is this among the things I want her to inherit from me? So I had to really examine that. And the answer is no, clearly no. So I have made it a job in my lifetime to heal this for my ancestry and for who's coming after me, so that she won't, among the things she'll inherit, it won't be the inability to sit with pain. And, surprisingly, the alcohol hasn't been, like trading one substance for another. That hasn't been so much the issue. It's been wanting to graduate from struggling. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, I'm sober now. So now, like, great, we're here, we've arrived. But then you get into the next spiral and the spiral path of life of coming back around to saying, well, what are you now hiding from? But I'm done hiding, right? I'm sober. There's always more that the ego wants to protect ourselves from. So the struggle that, you know, I've taken on is to, I mean, always have to have a coach or therapist because I work with people. And so the second I tell people I have all the answers, you have to be careful. Someone who is like, run, you know, you always have to be working on looking inward and seeing yourself clearly and cleaning up, you know, the stuff that you're willing to overstep, because that is the journey. The things we're overstepping contain pain, and pain contains messages. And the messages contain wisdom that wants to get you to the next level. So if we skip that whole thing, you know, people are like, I'm so stuck or I'm so frustrated. It's really so much a process of willing to go underground and go back to what we wanted to avoid in ourselves and be willing to hear it and to say, what is it meant to teach me that I can grow into myself? So my answer was value yourself. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not value yourself like that's the next thing you've done, but to like change your life in order to center on being whole and worthy and living like that and being that. And my business has been a new manifestation of being a voice for that for others, inviting
Yeah.
others to have that dialogue with
Yeah.
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you said that one big thing is that you wanted to love yourself, right? Like you just made a decision that, okay, now I'm going to value myself. I want to value myself. So this brings up my thought process. I think this is a really important part because I hear a lot like, I don't even like myself. How can I put myself out there, right? I don't value myself. I don't love myself, right? That's a really common language, whether people say it directly or not. That's what they're saying. So before we kind of get into that aspects, I do have a question and I want you to explore this. So I always talk about the payoff of us doing things, the payoff of staying in cycles and repeat cycles. So suffering is a big cycle that we stay in. So we try to do something and then we self-sabotage, or we drink, or we jump from here to there to this to that, right? We sabotage in one way or another, but we're getting something in return. And usually when we understand what we gain in return from that payoff, so like your payoff of like staying in a toxic cycle of not believing in yourself or not valuing yourself, right? That in itself, there's a payoff there. So when you think about that, what were you gaining from staying in that cycle of not valuing yourself?
Wow, great question. My story is feeling like I'm doing it right, like I'm right. So that my ego gets gratification from the sense that I have control. So I think control, the ways it manifests for us and for me, I know this because I've researched this in myself, comes from a feeling of being unsafe, like a lack of safety. So if we feel truly safe and trusting of the universe and of ourselves, control isn't something that comes up as a need. But when we feel unsafe or threatened, I can speak for myself, when I've felt threatened or small, insecure, my skills kick in and I can control situations. I'm very competent. I can do this, this, and that. And I can leverage, things in relationships. This is all sabotage, self-sabotage. Why is it related to not valuing yourself? This is such an interesting question, because I think to be in integrity with your essential self is fundamentally um, has boundaries, and to control other people, manipulate people, to need to be right transgresses our own boundaries. And I don't think that respects, it's not caring of ourselves or others. So, I mean, there's a connection in there. Um, I'm thinking just of a client conversation I had this morning. I'll just share. She told me that she has continually transgressed her own boundaries time and time again to get things done. So this is fresh on my mind, because when you listen to people, when you really listen, it matches something with our, intricate framework of knowledge. And so much of my training has been through so many people, but also matched up against what I'm doing in myself. So I relate to her story, because to value oneself is knowing what to say no to now. It's not always so much that we say yes to, because sometimes we know what we're about, we know what we want in life, but we haven't remembered to cut off all of these ways that we poison ourselves. With me, it's a lot of like anger. I have anger about not having control over things. And so to value myself, it's like put your focus back on saying no to things that hurt you or take you away from your focus and things like this. So that's an ongoing practice for me.
Yeah. Right. And saying no to things that maybe don't make you feel as in control, right? Because that kind of really full circles everything. That was your insecurity. That's where you had security, was with control. And I think when, from the work that I do and what I hear so much is that whenever, and payoffs are always rooted in control or in safety. There's a level of safety. We do it because we have to stay safe. And so I think what is a really common theme with control, especially if people have a lot of control in their life and they're trying to hold on to it as much as possible, whenever you kind of release that idea, like this surrender to, I can't control this outcome. And if I want my life to be what I want it to be, I have to release control, which then allows for space to have respect for yourself and create boundaries. And it just automatically is like a dissolution of the control, allows for everything you were trying to find in the control. The universe is like, here you go. Here's an opening.
Wow.
Now you can value yourself, because you trust that what you're going to do is going to open up for you. And those next steps of success are really there. So that leads to, like, with your business, right? So you have multiple businesses you founded, you have done so much stuff. So how has this work integrated and helped you attain the level of success that you have today?
I mean, the business I'm doing now probably would be the most current example. I did not have this type of conversation even 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I was in my school founder era. So during COVID, founded my first school. And that's a very different business model, process, all of it. So what I'm doing now harkens back to the time when I was training actors, which was 20 years ago. But it's come up again because of so much work I've done to work with myself. This phrase, I know you'll appreciate it, Kayla, a friend gave me. He said, what about doing the work that unlocks other people's work? And I took that to mean like inner work. And so that, like, that's my mission in life now. So I took that on. And the current business that I do, I serve people as clients. I'm looking at expanding into community. I have an online course, but my clients are in the question about their value. They don't want to be. Let's be very clear. These people are competent. They have businesses. They have a lot of accomplishment and visibility. And so to not know your value when you've come this far is not something people are willing to really go into. But there's a time and a place where it's like, okay, I'm actually stuck. So then you get to, like, I've created this veneer of success. I mean, it's mid to late career phase. I wouldn't even say veneer, that's not fair, but I have so much success, but now it's like I've changed. And by the way, all of the success was built on so much learning, but it didn't. Now it's time to go back and go deep onto the things that actually have affected us this whole time and carry those themes forward, so we go into a deeper place, merging the professional with the personal. Because one thing we get when we get to a place in our career of have accomplished so much and have such an impact and worked so hard and learned so much is that you're one person. You're no longer the professional you and the personal you. So my business is about holding a space where these can magically, through a gaining of insight over time, working together to emerge as one person and become really clear on what it is that you've come through that you want to share now at this next point in your life, whether as a speaker, usually as a speaker, but as another business or a service to change people's lives. I mean, one client said, I grew up having to understand with an illiterate, this is one of my clients, my father was illiterate and my mother left when I was 6, and it was just us, and I was on the construction sites day in, day out with him. And he said time and time again, I needed to learn to read, marry someone who has a career. You know, that was his version of empowering her, right? And surpassed me. And so she said, it seemed impossible. It seemed impossible, and I had to learn how to see the possible in the impossible. So this is an example of the kind of deep understanding of who you are and what you've come through that happens when you value, you're saying, I'm going to go back in and see what I'm here to do because I trust that my value is beyond what I'm in touch with now.
Yeah. And so for you, you talked a lot about how there needs to be that merging of like almost like this persona that we build for business and this other persona we build in our personal life. When was that merge for you and what was that like?
During COVID, I think, when I had my second kid and I had just opened a school. I was running a nonprofit and was home and was in a bubble. And I realized that I had a problem drinking because it all looked beautiful. What a beautiful life. I have a home in Costa Rica. I have a home in Maine and one in Arizona. And I have, you know, like the beautiful life story, as my friend calls it. And it's not worth it because I was not whole inside of me. So it doesn't really matter. People are like, oh, the success you've had. Success is the tip of the iceberg. It's only what people see. Okay. And then everything underneath is your fulfillment. And it really matters. I had to go in and be like, what am I actually about? What do I care about? And I had to get sober and say, I'm not going to care about. I had to pivot from the school, and a lot of personal changes were made. And I went through some I learned I had an autoimmune disease during the same time. So my body was sick. And I just knew I had something next coming. Something's going to happen. But my therapist told me up until even a year ago, a little bit before I started my business, he said, you're so frustrated that you're in this dark, nascent time where nothing's happening. You're underground and you're just figuring it all out. This is where you're supposed to be, because you will sprout again, but you can't sprout until you've done this work under the soil. And that was so valuable, to get permission to just stop succeeding, stop having a beautiful story and be a little bit of a mess and like let it surface. So that's what I do with my clients. I provide that for them. So we're in a safe container. The doors are closed. You're with me. This is a safe space and you're the one in control because I'm listening to you. We are working together. I tell my clients, I don't serve you. You and I are a team serving your learning where we're heading. And so we're going to work together on that. And it's such a relief to be like, okay, this is the place for it to get messy. Let's see what we have here. And then they emerge with this insight. And that confidence on stage that people are like, how do you, learn to be a speaker? 90% of that presence of being an inspiring speaker who can just speak deeply and move people comes from the work you've done to get clear on who you are, and more important, who you are not. That work is what causes that to happen.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so when you were talking about what your therapist told you about, you have to, you don't have to keep succeeding right now, do that work underneath the soil. And the visual that came to my mind is that oftentimes we don't do that work, so we still sprout, and so we still bloom in whatever way. But there's usually like a default, like we don't have the nutrients that we need. There's things. So, and that's what I think it's so confusing for people who are entrepreneurs, because like success still comes in a version, but it's usually at an expense or a detriment. And so I want to ask you about that work you had to do. Well, what do you think was the most important work? So for you to flourish and be the beautiful flower plant that you are, for still using that analogy, what do you think is the number one thing you had to do? So when you bloomed successfully and in alignment.
Yeah, that's good insight, because you do, things come to fruition. It's just a matter of whether you planted those seeds intentionally or not. And that's really where the difference is being, knowing what it means to water the plants you want to water.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I worked on, I know everyone wants like that magic trick, is to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that I love that you said that, because I think that that's what people avoid the most, because it's the most uncomfortable, but it's the only place you can start. So until you
Yeah.
start feeling and you experience it, and then you're honest with yourself about it, and it's not, you're trying to make it something else that it's not, and then not judging it. Right? If you feel like crap, or you feel resentful to your kids, or you're frustrated with your growth, or you are just second guessing all those things, there's no judgment. It's just what's happening. It's just what's present. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be any other way, because it can't be any other way. And so it's just like, this is what it is. And so I'm going to feel it. And as soon as I allow myself to feel it without judgment, then it can actually be transmuted into something else that's productive, which is awareness. And then we can take that awareness and we can do something different. And so, but we can't transmute any of that stuff into something other than that unless we remove that judgment. I think that's a big thing that people have to learn on this journey, especially when we're growing. That's why I love to talk about the deep, deep, deep work in relation to business, is because, of course, our kids are our mirrors, our spouses are our mirrors, but also I think that but we're comfortable with those people in our lives, right? There's a level of comfort, and there's also a level of a connectedness that's not in our business. And so we can rely sometimes on, okay, we can be what we might consider the worst versions of ourselves with them, but there's a level of unconditional love that still upholds us. But with our business, that's not there. We don't have that luxury for unconditional love from those that are on the other side. And so it pushes back against us so firmly. And if we let it, we just quit. Right, because it's too much. And that's why I think really building strong resilience and understanding of self is what makes the strongest business owners. And it's what makes the strongest
Mm.
business, is because we can understand ourselves. And then on top of that, it's not just about being successful or the strongest business, it's about enjoying it. It's not a no, it's not a struggle or a hustle, because we've done that work and we've allowed ourselves to show up that way. So if you were to give the listeners like your just solid piece of advice, of like, if you want them to transmute their fears or whatever into success in their business, what's just like one thing you would tell them?
Be experimental. And by that, I mean the chances that the answer lies in something you don't yet know how to do is very likely. And so realizing you don't know what you don't know is very powerful, because if you realize you only see this much, then the work starts to be, how can I see more and have more opportunities? So people tend to go inward at that point and say, what do I need to do open more? But some people, they come to it in their own time. The question, again, going back to your question, is how can you find out more than you already know how to do? If you knew how to do it, you would already be doing it. So
Yes.
people bang their head against the wall, like, why can't I do it? Well, you don't know how. No one trained you in this, and that's okay. But now you get to be experimental, do experiments, try this. And people, entrepreneurs, are comfortable in this area because you're probably going to fail. There are 10,000 ways to not make a battery, and they all had to be figured out before the battery happened. So don't be afraid for your experiments to fail, but do things that you think maybe are even crazy in service of finding out more.
Yeah. Right. I love that because I talk a lot about the confidence competence loop, right? You gain more confidence when you become more competent and you get the skills
Yeah,
that you need. And then you go back and now you're more confident in that because you've gained the competence. And we just keep spinning and spinning in the confidence competence loop. And then everything changes. But it's that openness and not judging the fact that you don't know something. So that's great
absolutely.
advice. I absolutely love that. This has been an amazing conversation. I could probably keep talking for another 5 hours, but we will end it here. But I want people to be able to connect with you and work with you. So I would love for you just to take some time and share where people can find you and what you're offering right now.
Sure. The website is my name, JoannaHortonMcPherson.com. I'm on all the social platforms as well under that name. And I offer audiences like yours, listeners who are particularly interested, to meet with me for 30 minutes to talk about their transformative message. It can be a very valuable 30-minute conversation, even if this isn't the right fit or the right time, to just sit with someone like me who will give them questions that they can take and work with on their own, can really shift things for people. So I'm happy to point them to my website where there's a link to book that 30-minute session. And I also do videos. I put out content of little snippets like we're talking about. And for anyone who wants to actually take a course and do what we're talking about and become a speaker telling your story, who doesn't have the resources or time to be a private client, there's an online course coming in 2025. It's self-paced, and I take you through the entire recipe book, and you land with your talk at the end of it.
Oh, that's amazing. I absolutely love that. So I'll put all those links in the show notes so everyone can access them and check you out because I know that's going to be extremely powerful for everyone who goes there. So thank you so much again for being here. And everyone, thanks so much for listening. And I will see you all next week.